Yes, thanks. Hi, Jamyan. Hi, everyone on the line. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Jennifer Hong. I'm currently a forest ecosystem restoration consultant for the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, where I support international forest policy and interagency cooperation on forests and restoration. I've also worked across various forest-related sectors, including the Canadian government, the Singapore National Parks Board, and Youth for Nature, supporting a range of climate change, biodiversity, land management policies and programs, in addition to youth advocacy and engagement in global forest issues. So it's great to be here today, and I'll pass it back to Jamyan, my co-host.
And thank you, Jennifer. Have our warmest welcome. Also, we are joined by our two speakers. Our first speaker is Professor Dr. Tony Simons. Dr. Tony Simons is a senior fellow and former executive director at CIFOR and ICIF, and also the senior fellow at the G20 Global Land Initiative. He has a PhD in forest genetics from Cambridge University, UK. Tony is an innovative and inspirational leader, dedicating more than 30 years to working in over 40 developing countries at the landscape level and the agriculture-forestry interface in research policy development and delivery. Unfortunately, due to a transport change, Dr. Tony Simons can't meet us online today. However, he kindly recorded his presentation, which will be displayed later in the webinar. And our second speaker is Mr. Christophe Besacier from FAO, Food and Forestry Organization of United Nations. How are you, Christophe? Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, briefly, thank you. I am very well, Christophe Besacier. I'm the team leader of the restoration team in the forestry division of FAO HQ. And also I am leading the task force on best practices in the context of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Christophe. It's our great honor to have you. Okay, so to those joining us for the first time, the Generation Restoration Dialogue is a series of monthly webinars hosted by the G20 Global Land Initiative. We are a global initiative that aims to reduce degraded land by 50% by 2040. To hear more about us and the Generation Restoration Dialogues, please visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, and follow us on our social media. Okay, today we will talk about forests and forest restoration. As highlighted in the webinar title, forests are the guardians of our Mother Earth, maintain climate stability, protect biodiversity, combat desertification, and provide resources that create jobs and support the economy. Our speakers will first present their insights on how we can restore and use forests sustainably, and then answer your questions. So let's watch the recording from our first speaker, Dr. Tony Simons, who will speak about forests and forest restoration.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are in the world. And first of all,
sorry, but this is my presentation, this one. It's not the presentation of the speaker online recorded.
Sorry?
The presentation on the screen is my presentation. It's not the presentation of the speaker.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are in the world. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak with you today, and also for the generous introduction. I must, of course, apologize to everyone as well that because of flight disruptions, I was unable to join you in person or in real time this afternoon. and therefore I give you this recorded presentation. For the next iteration of these really exciting generation restoration dialogues. And this one is about the future of forests, or put simply, forest futures. I'd like to have a conversation with you today about three topics. First of all, framing the issue about forests past and present, situating the future of forests against that, forest functions and forest values, and lastly, to end on some building action on forests and land restoration. So to our first issue, and you can read that out much quicker than I can recite it to you, so I'll allow you to do that.
So Dr. Tony Simons just kindly shares three clusters of the forming issues in terms of the forest.
I've grouped it into these three clusters. So the first one is the extent of forestry and what's happened to it. The second one is around the benefits that we get from forests. And lastly, this conundrum, this enigma of why forests are so important, and yet we tend to undervalue and underappreciate them. This wonderful diagram from FAO and from the Global Forest Resource Assessment shows where forests in the world and how much they are. And when you put an equator on top of that map, you see that most people live in the north, and yet most tropical forest, at least, is in the south. And it raises the question of, well, who are the stewards of those forests, and are they being appreciated and recognized and compensated and having due stewardship? Benefits from looking after that huge extent of tropical rainforest. So in your careers and in your presentations and in your pitches to donors and investors, you want to be zooming in and zooming out on topics, on timescales, etc. And so let's zoom right out to geological time and think about when the Earth was 370 million years ago, and it was the time that trees started to evolve. And at that time, according to this model at least, you can see that Bonn was underwater. And the darkest green areas are the areas where there was maximum vegetation, and that was the place where forests evolved. And these incredible woody specimens, the first species being Archaeopteryx, evolved like this, in an environment like that, and remembering that CO2 is 10 times what it is today, and average global temperatures were 10 degrees hotter than they are today. And it was trees that made Earth habitable for animals and mammals, and then humans as well. And their destruction will also lead to our destruction. Now, the concept of what a forest is and what it looks like does vary around the world, and you will have situated in your own mind some concept of a forest or where you think it is, and they're all valid. And it's trying to share your perspective with other people and find commonalities and alignment in principles, investment and valuation that's important. Because that tropical humid forest in the Amazon is different to this dry forest in West Africa on the banks of the Niger River, and different to the forest systems here in Southern Europe around agriculture, that are situated inside agriculture, and the benefits that those producers and farmers get. Now, the area that you're thinking of restoring or working with others to restore may not be as badly degraded as this site in Western Kenya, but it does help you ask questions. And that is, who really can help come and invest here? Should we choose easier environments to go to? What are the motivations of investors and different actors and principles? Who are the customers and the clients of those goods and services? What's the value proposition that you have an offer? Why you? How much is that combination of blended finance that you seek? And what does, at the end of the day, does success look like? And how can you align that to other stakeholders' motivations? So we end up asking the question, why trees and landscapes? Well, trees are just these incredible organisms. I mean, they are literally the dinosaurs, the giants of the plant kingdom that, unlike their animal equivalents, have survived. And these are so amazing living organisms. Nothing is older or bigger than a tree. And they can change microclimate. They can add oxygen to the atmosphere. They can provide a framework for other biodiversity to flourish. Now, part of the difficulties, and I thank Meiner van Noorderwyk for his conceptual work here, is thinking about, well, on the right-hand side, this is how we tend to divide things up. We segregate agriculture, environment, forestry, production, natural forest. And yet, as we see landscapes, whether temperate or tropical, they tend to be more of a mosaic and smaller blocks of land. They're not segregated. So that integration process is happening in reality, but it's not happening with policy and investments and other thinking around. And that's one of the boundaries to our problems in thinking and conceptualizing forestry. And one of the advantages of the G20 Global Land Initiative is that ability to say, well, what's important is land. And land is that universal platform that connects all living and non-living things. And pictorially, this is an amazing diagram from Hirova and colleagues. Shows just how land is so important. We need to put much more attention on land and the attributes within it. So to our second topic, forest functions and values. Now, the economics of environment, the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, the TEEB initiative led by UNEP has been a fantastic game changer, building on the work of Capitals Coalition and others in GIST Advisory around how we can better value nature. Because it is a cliche, but human nature has been to put humans before nature. And we need to build in those negative externalities and look at trade-offs and synergies and because not everything is win-win-win. And we've got to be much clearer at differentiating between the cost of something and the price of something and the value, because we're undervaluing nature and forestry and the attributes within it. And one of the best examples of that is with carbon. Now, we know that it's the most variable commodity in the world. At the low end, a ton of carbon is firewood from $50 or $60. As a ton of diamond is worth $100 billion. And we were unhappy with that huge range and decided to affect it even more with this thing called atmospheric carbon at $2 to $20 a ton. But when you look at tropical timber, why would you accept that $2 to $20 a ton when you can, on the wholesale market get between $100 and $3,500 per cubic meter of timber? And that is the conundrum. And can you imagine if we treated oil, the oil industry in the same way that tropical timber is treated? So we would go to Vladimir Putin or to Saudi Arabia or to the US and say, well, we know exactly how much carbon there is in the barrel of oil. So therefore, we've got a fantastic deal for you. We can give you $4 a barrel, $4.22 a barrel. You have to lock it up in a warehouse for 100 years. But and actually you may not put all the $4 because we need some MRV, so we'll try and give you as much as we can. I mean, you would just be laughed out the room. And yet we've done that, a serious endeavor with forests, and that has helped undervalue them. And to our third topic, building action on forest and land restoration, the reason why you're here and looking for tips on how you might better help engage in this process. This is a great diagram from WRI when they were convening the Global Restoration Council. And on the left-hand side, you can see the diagnosis of what we have today and the huge, vast tracts of degraded and deforested land, and the vision looking ahead to 2050. And there's 5 actions there, labeled 1 to 5. And you may only be doing one of those, or you might be doing combinations of them, but whatever you do is going to be affected by other people's actions. And so this is that, again, that concept, remember, of zooming in and zooming out. So you're zooming out here to look at the whole offering and what you're doing and how it's aligning with others, how it's complementing others. And whenever you're trying to get support for your work, don't criticize others. Don't, try and tear them down. Build on and say, well, together, these things are working. And this is where we situate our efforts within these particular global frameworks. Now, one of the greatest hopes for forests and for land restoration was at COP26 of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in Glasgow in November 2021. And here, there was first time a World Leaders Declaration on Forests. It was huge, and something like 130 countries signed up to these 6 shared efforts around conserving forests, the policies, the enhancing rural livelihoods, agricultural policies, financing, and financial flows. Now, the problem is that it kind of fell off the wagon with the post-COVID era, with now a lot of issues around globalization and inefficiencies and conflicts in the world. And so we're stuck with nationally determined contributions. And at the end of the day, really it's going to be individually determined contributions and corporate contributions and nationally determined contributions together as the aggregate that is going to really be a game changer. And that is why it can really help if you can situate and connect and align your work with corporates and private sector, as well as country efforts. But at the end of the day, it's got to boil down to people having confidence that you have the evidence to back up statements such as, well, what is the current level of biodiversity, and will this project or will these actions or will this new technology enhance this, regenerate the land and biodiversity? Will it be neutral, or will it diminish it? Will it be degenerative? And that's going to be really important for you to be able to demonstrate. And also to get across that thing of, well, it's not a one-size-fits-all. This is the diversity in soil organic carbon and clay content and soil structure. You can see from just one 10-kilometer by 10-kilometer grid in Africa. And that's why it's not going to be one-size-fits-all. It's not going to be a point estimate, but it's going to be ranges and degrees of confidence around those median values. And that's an important part to get across to others, and saying, well, and we'll buffer that by having this cushion, by having this over collateralization of our efforts, because we don't want to overpromise. And one important point, really, and maybe it's the most important point for you, is those with really powerful data and those who manage it well will succeed the most. Because this is as much a data management exercise as it will be a technological innovation, organizing households, convening stakeholders, being champions, providing inputs, being an aggregator, trader, whatever. It's going to be how that data connects together, how it's used for evidence and linked up to other evidence groups as well. And how that data, whether it's in the form of intellectual capital or physical capital or financial capital, links up with human capital and social capital and political capital. And it's not that financial capital is paramount, that it's the one that has to be optimized and maximized, and everything else just has to reach a threshold level. It's about looking at trade-offs, and it's about looking at synergies and being able to take decisions in the light of inadequate information. We never have perfect information usually, and it's how your offering fits. And the recognition and acknowledgement of that reassures your investors that you're risk aware, and you would then try and manage that risk. And one of the best ways to convince people is with demonstrations. And this is Ethiopia at the end of the Derg in the early 1990s. And the government then had some years of drought, and the peoples had this lack of rainfall. And the vegetation was disappearing from the countryside. People were being moved into towns and cities and villages because of just the dire situation. They couldn't reach people who were so dispersed. And one community here in Gagera said, no, we want to stay on our land. This is our ancestral land. And therefore, to do that, we need people to come together. And so if you want to stay in this village, every adult must work 40 days for free in the watershed, planting trees, watering trees, keeping livestock out, building erosion control measures. And the water table, which was down in the valley below, was 15 meters below the surface of that supposed cropland, and nothing was being produced. And just in 20 years, yes, it took 20 years, but they were able to transform this situation to this situation. You can hear birds singing, you can see the vegetation, you can see the water in the river, and that water table rising from 15 meters below to 1 meter with these Gambians and flood control and helping revegetate that. And it's really helped that area prosper and been a model for others to look at. So to our last slide, and that is these attributes that are listed here, these 9 attributes. This is what any term sheet or pitch or offering that you make to a public or a private or a philanthropic investor, they want to see what your value proposition is. They want to see how you're connected and understanding the other dimensions of it, and satisfying questions in your presentations and in your proposals before they have to ask them. If you take 1,000 proposals to an investor, typically of that, maybe only 30 to 50 will actually ever get to speak to the investor. Everything is filtered out to start with. So if you're one of those lucky 3 to 5% of people that actually just get to look and speak to the investor, they have a conversion ratio from proposals themselves somewhere between 10 and 30%. They don't fund 100% of people that they speak to. And so the odds are getting it right and learning from those things, and it won't come first time, and it will be very difficult. And so often the easiest way is to be a sub-deliverer on someone else's work and build your own skills as you go. Don't be too impatient. We want youth to be dynamic and motivated and really energetic, but it will take time. And just as you saw, that community waited 20 years to transform the landscape. It's not happening overnight, but stay in it for the long term, communicate, be very deliberate in your actions, be very learning from those, and you will succeed, and you will be that fantastic intergenerational connector that helps my generation, who's messed up the planet with others, and your generations and the next following generation after you to address a lot of these environmental issues in a responsible and equitable way across the world. So thanks very much for listening. I really appreciate it. Again, apologies for not being with you there in person. And please reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch or you want to ask a question or be engaged in some way. I very much look forward to it. Thanks very much for listening. And please do go out and continue to support land restoration efforts in the G20 Global Land Initiative convened by UNCCD. Thanks very much.
Okay. Well, thank you to Tony for his excellent presentation. I learned a lot. And I think we can all learn a lot in terms of understanding how our societies have evolved with forests, how integral they are to our environment, and the types of questions that we should be asking ourselves when we're doing restoration work, as well as presenting the value of forests to maybe investors or other stakeholders in the group. I also really appreciated that Tony spoke to the policy tools as well as data and the importance of data in that presentation to, again, continue our work on restoration. That's very important. I also just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that there are a lot of folks in this webinar. I see a lot of introductions and a lot of folks who are involved in restoration, and I see a lot of questions and answers. So I just want to remind everybody that there is the Q&A box available to you. So if you leave a question, we'll have a few minutes towards the end of our presentations for a short question and answer period. And then we will select a few questions and go from there. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome our second speaker, Mr. Christophe Besacier from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations to present on forest and landscape restoration, as well as the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration.
Yeah, thank you. Can you see my screen properly with the slide? Okay, perfect. So good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everyone, from wherever you are. And it's a pleasure to be with you. And I will just maybe give you the flavor of the importance of ecosystem restoration to achieve global sustainable development goals. Quickly, I just want to give you how the restoration movement is ongoing to address the current challenge and achieve those SDGs. And there is few important key facts on human-induced land degradation, and it has a strong impact on agri-food system and on the food security of people on the planet. First, we have more or less 1,660 million hectares of land degraded due to human impact. Other land, agricultural land, are tree cover areas and forests. Forests represent 460 million hectares, agricultural land 1,040 million hectares, and other lands that are urban area or area covered by ice or on the planet, more or less 160 million hectares degraded or urban area. 60% are in agricultural land, cropland or pastoral land. And in the same times, we need to produce 50% more food, feed, fiber, and biofuel in 2050, comparing to the production of 2012, if we want to keep and provide food and feed and fibers and energy to the planet. So a big issue, a big challenge. Here you can see where this degradation is happening on the map. You can see that we have some regions that have a strong human-induced land degradation, other less, with more stable situation or even improvement and relatively low pressure. So everyone on the planet is not equal in terms of environment and land degradation, and the restoration efforts needs to be aligned with the situation and where degradation is high and where we need to improve ecosystems to have functional and sustainable agri-food systems. Deforestation and land degradation have multiple adverse impacts, both for people and nature. 3 billion people globally are impacted by land degradation. I said we have almost 2 billion hectares of degraded land that are with a potential for restoration. We have the benefits of restoration are considered as 10 times higher than the cost of restoration based on economic data, including the IPBES report in 2019. We are losing more or less 10% of the annual global gross product in ecosystem services. And we have a high potential of carbon sequestration, of course, if we restore at scale and the degraded ecosystems and the degraded forest. We have a global political momentum, and both at global and regional level, that I would like to show you quickly, particularly on forest and landscape restoration concept that I will describe a bit better after. The definition of forest and landscape restoration was prepared by IUCN and WWF, the first definition in 2000. In 2003, a global partnership on forest landscape restoration was created. FAO is part of it. It is currently chaired by a colleague from WWF Brazil, Anita de Direction, but we have a partnership still active on forest landscape restoration. The Bone Challenge was launched in 2011 and strongly pushed by Germany with in mind to restore 100 million hectares by 2020 initially. Now it's 350 million hectares by 2030. A New York Declaration of Forest was also approved in 2014. New SDGs, where Sustainable Development Goals were approved with the Agenda 2030. You can see also an important milestone is the official launch of the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration for the period 2021-2030. And more recently, the Cumin-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and its Target 2 on restoration. That is an ambitious target. And at regional level, I mentioned as well on this slide, the recently approved European Nature Restoration Law. That is the first legally binding restoration commitment at regional level. We have also a lot of regional initiative on the planet, in Africa particularly, with the Green Wall, with the African Restoration Initiative, IFR 100. In Latin America, Initiative 20 by 20, Mediterranean region, the Central Asia, Europe and Central Asia region with ECA 30. And you can see on this slide that the momentum is there, the political will is there, a lot of pledges, commitments are already more or less taken by decision maker with a strong political will. And the implementation is ongoing, sometimes slowly than expected, but it's ongoing. And we will give more data on this implementation as FAO soon, because we are preparing a report for October 26th, named The State of the World Forest. And this year, it is focused on forest and landscape restoration, and with a chapter with a lot of new data on this topic. Few elements on the key concept of ecosystem restoration and forest landscape restoration. I think it's important. As you can see, ecosystem restoration, it's a continuum. It's a process of halting and reversing degradation with in mind to improve ecosystem services and to recover the biodiversity. It's a wide continuum of intervention, depending on where we are, local condition, and also societal choices in a given landscape. The objective is not always to come back to a full recovering to a native ecosystem. Sometimes it's the objective is to repair the ecosystem function to keep a productive objectives. And we have this continuum that is important to consider when you are working at landscape level. You have several land users with different objectives, and you need to find the consensus in the landscape to know what people want to do with their resources, what people want to do in their landscape. And it's not always just to conserve and protect, but they have also productive objectives. They need to generate incomes and to use natural resources to survive. So this consensus is important. You can see that restoration is also important because it is contributing to several global conventions. The United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, UNCCD, that is the one at the heart of the Global Land Initiative, but also the UNFCCC, the CBD, and depending on the restoration approach, you have, depending on the consensus at landscape level, the contribution to climate objective, to biodiversity objective, to land degradation objective are balanced differently. But globally, any restoration activity is contributing more or less to the three Rio Convention. And to the Sustainable Development Goals, not only the Sustainable Development Goal 15, that is on restoration of land, but also the others on food security, rural development, water, etc. Quickly, in a given landscape, if you want to see what FLR, forest landscape restoration, is, first, it's an active process. If we use the definition of the Global Partnership on FLR, it's an active process that brings people together to identify, negotiate, and implement practices that restore an agreed optimal balance of ecological and social and economic benefits on forests and trees. But in taking into consideration the need of the people living in the landscape, taking into consideration the multiple land users. So as you can see on this picture, you have several options in a landscape for restoration. You can do assisted natural regeneration in the slope. You can do tree plantation in zone where when you want to limit watershed and erosion risk. You can do tree plantation of local species to generate income and develop value chain. You can do agroforestry, natural regeneration in buffer zone of national park. You can also manage existing forest and enrich with this forest with tree plantation. And depending on what you are doing in terms of activity, you are generating also different benefits. It could be your objective to generate benefits for drinking water, for stable soil, for carbon storage, for recreation and ecotourism, for biodiversity or production of wood, non-wood forest product, food security, nutrition. All those objectives need to be well balanced when you are planning your restoration activity. I think I am a bit late, so I will accelerate a little bit, and I would like to show you a few information on the decade on ecosystem restoration and to highlight maybe a few products of interest for you developed in the context of this decade on ecosystem restoration. So this decade was approved in 2019 at the UN General Assembly and launched formally in 2021 with the objective to move forward with three main pathways that are not supposed to be in silo, but to be combined to achieve ecosystem restoration at scale. First, one idea is to build a global movement, so to communicate, to have use and restoration practitioner moving forward together in the same direction. There is the objective to generate a political support, to have to increase this political will on restoration. But for also you need to develop technical capacity to achieve restoration objectives at scale. As you have seen on the map, there is a lot of area where the restoration is required. To support this implementation, several task forces have been established. One is a youth task force led by young professionals. There is one led by IUCN, a science task force. There is a finance task force led by the World Bank. And there is two technical task forces led by FAO, and I will give you a bit more detail on those one. One is on monitoring. It's led by a colleague in my team in the forestry division, and we develop a framework to monitor and report the progress of restoration efforts in the context of the decade. And I am personally the lead of the task force on best practices to enhance capacity development and knowledge dissemination effort throughout the decade. And I want to show you maybe few tools we have developed and products we have developed on this topic. At the beginning of the decade in 21, we have prepared and officially launched at the IUCN Congress in Marseille in September 21, the principle for ecosystem restoration to guide the United Nations decade, to clarify what is the restoration, ecosystem restoration we want to promote as a decade, with in mind that we need to respect some principle and those principles, the 10 principles are: we need broad engagement, we need to contribute to global goals, we need to consider the continuum of activity I mentioned, we need to generate benefits for people and nature, etc. I don't want to give you too much details. There is a QR code. You are free to download this document. It's available in 5 UN languages to date, and the Russian is coming soon. And you can download online with the QR code and on the website of the decade this document. Building on those principles, we have developed also some standards of practice, because those principles are what we want to do, but are how to be aligned with those principles. And the restoration practitioner and the member of the best practice task force decided to develop some guidelines to help practitioners to maximize the ecological, cultural, and socioeconomic benefits of their restoration initiative. So in those standards of practice, we have more than 300 recommendations or good practices on how to apply the principles of the decade. They are supposed to be applicable in all types of ecosystem. And we are currently preparing a tool and an e-learning course that will be launched in 26 to facilitate the use and the adoption of those standards of practice by a restoration practitioner. Again, you have the QR code for this document and the decision-making tool, the e-learning course to be launched in 26 will be available first in English, but we will also try to make them available in all UN languages. I let you the time to use the QR code if you want to take it with your phone. But in any case, this document is available on the UN Decade website and on the FAO website. Another important tool that was developed by FAO is the Framework for Ecosystem Restoration Monitoring, the FERM. And the FERM is a tool with several windows. There is a registry of restoration initiative and a registry of good practices from all ecosystems. We have a geospatial tool for visualization of restoration data. And we have a search engine tool for consultation of good practices and ecosystem restoration. So register, it's the green button, visualize is the blue button, and search good practices is the yellow button. Again, there is a QR code. The website on Google, if you Google FERM and you will FERM registry, you will immediately find it in Google, and you can explore what is proposed on this platform. To date, we have more than 2,000 good practices available in this platform. We have connected existing platform, WOCAT, who is a long-term partner of the UNCCD, collecting good practices on sustainable land management. And in the good practices collected by WOCAT, several of them were already focused on restoration. So we connected WOCAT with another database named Panorama Solution, GoPro4, plus the database of the decade with new good practices currently collected. And to date, we have 2,000 good practices, and we are happy to receive new one. And we have a group of reviewers. We are checking the quality first before publication, but it's easy to submit a good practices. You need to go to register your initiative. And when you have registered an initiative, you can submit a new good practices. Excuse me. Finally, just to come back on what I've said, every 2 years, so for the State of the World Forest is prepared by FAO, by the Forestry Division. It's one of the flagship publication of FAO Forestry Division. 1 year ago, my director asked me to focus and lead the preparation of the next SOFO 26, and it will be focused on forest and landscape restoration with a title that is to date before editing, Restoring Forest and Landscape Restoration, the way forward for a sustainable future. In this document, we have several chapters that will illustrate how restoration is a relevant option to achieve SDGs, to provide benefit for people and nature. We have a chapter showing key pathways to combine to make restoration investment impactful at scale. We have also one chapter with several study cases from around 18 study cases from all the regions in the world and with different angles and different ecosystems to show the power of restoration to build a sustainable future. And we will officially publish this document the 28th of September 26. We received the comment from our technical reviewer last Friday, and we are this week super busy because we are integrating the comment received, and we will send the document for the editing, technical editing next week. So it's a work in progress. But if you have interest to read this edition of the State of the World Forest, be patient. Coming soon, it will be for the 28th of September 26. I stop there. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer to questions if we have still some time for discussion together. Bye.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Christophe, including many useful online resources for further study on forest restoration. I believe that, like Jennifer and I, our audience is keen to learn from you. So let's see what questions are in the chat box.
Yeah, we've got quite a number of questions. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to try to synthesize and combine a few of the questions. So Christophe, you had mentioned that you are the lead for the task force for best practices. I think a few people are curious to understand how you incorporate different types of knowledge when it comes to developing best practices for ecosystem restoration that balance different types of values in a local context. So, local community benefits, economic benefits, environmental, and also considering, interests of urbanization or expansion of industrialism, things like this.
Okay, first, this task force is led by FAO, by me and another colleague, but it's not my task force. It is the task force of all restoration practitioners. It's not a closed club, it's an open task force. And maybe in the participants, we have some members, I don't know. To date, we have more than 400 members from more than 100 different organizations, including people from the academic sector, the Society for Ecological Restoration, big NGOs, WWF, member of the Global Partnership on Forest Landscape Restoration, C4ICRAF, and of course, we have also restoration practitioners active at the national level. And the good practice and the initiative and the good practices submitted are coming from the ground, are coming from the local restoration implementers. We are going to have a minimum of review process to ensure the quality of what we are publishing to inspire the world. But of course, it's the FARM registry I presented with the search engine tool is and the registry with new good practices is something that is owned by everyone. If you want to submit your practices, if you want to share your knowledge, you are welcome to contribute to this. And finally, to answer also to your question on the inclusion and how we integrate the knowledge from different categories of stakeholders, two elements maybe. In the context of this task force, we have developed a capacity, knowledge, and learning action plan and we are working on several capacity development initiatives. One is for local communities, and we recently last year launched a call for champions, local community champions, to allow them first to be recognized as local community championing restoration at local level. And those champions, we are facilitating the knowledge exchange and we will launch a new call this year. We have also a capacity development initiative more focused on indigenous people group and biocentric restoration efforts led by indigenous people. In the State of the World Forest I mentioned, we have several study cases in the chapter focused on study cases in the SOFO that are example of the ground led by indigenous people and local community. I don't know if I answered to the question, but we are trying to be inclusive and to consider that in a given landscape, the restoration is not led by people based in Rome like me or Washington or Berlin. Right? The restoration is done on the ground by people that are to survive in their landscape, to have economic benefits also from their activity, and you need to manage properly this balance between production purposes and conservation purposes, and it's always a trade-off between the two in any landscape where you are implementing restoration. Stop there.
Amazing. Thank you for that response. I agree, right? There's lots of different values that we've discussed in both of the presentations today. And so it's great to hear that FAO is working so hard to make sure that perspectives are heard from all across the world. Yeah, so
I just want to add something that we have developed in partnership with the G20 Land Initiative. Some e-learning courses, and my team is also supporting the translation process in French and Spanish of this series of e-learning courses. So we have joint product with the G20 Land Initiative, and I don't remember her name, Karen, who is playing a key role in this initiative. So it's for us, it's important. I am working a lot with the soil and water division in FAO. Restoration is not only with forest and trees, it's also soil, it's also water, wetland and coastal area. So we really need to integrate different sectors and knowledge to achieve restoration targets at scale.
Okay, amazing. I think another question that's come up is understanding more Global South and Global North collaboration opportunities. So maybe you could share examples of how maybe technology could be shared. I think there's a question about, using applications and data, or potentially collaboration or funding collaborations between Global North and South, if you have any examples.
Okay, I have several examples, and we are trying to facilitate the exchanges between the initiative I mentioned before, the African Restoration Initiative, with the 20 by 20 initiative, with the initiative in Central Asia. But a good example of this partnership is maybe in the Mediterranean region. Around the Mediterranean Sea, we have European countries, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece, Turkey, and in the southern part of the Mediterranean, we have North African countries, we have Lebanon, we have Jordan, we have and we have a strong collaboration on restoration and land restoration in this region. For years, we have since 1948, we have a committee on Mediterranean forestry question, and we have a collaboration between Mediterranean countries from the north and the south on management of their forest restoration activities, knowledge sharing. It could be on monitoring. It could be also on genetic resources. To restore, you need genetic resources. The borders of those genetic resources are not linked to the level of development of countries. There is some distribution area for each resources, and you have some trees that are in the south and in the north of the Mediterranean region, for example, some species that are crossing the border. So we have a working group on this topic and how to have the relevant and required genetic resources to restore properly. We have a lot of collaboration also south-south because the knowledge for restoration is very important and relevant at local level, at landscape level. As I mentioned, the indigenous people group in Brazil, they know their landscape, they have knowledge, and how we use this knowledge also to restore their own landscape, but also to inspire other region or other indigenous people, or even so it's not a topic that is for the north or for the south. The degradation is everywhere, as you have seen on the map. Everyone need to learn, need to develop relevant policy framework. The European law is a legally binding agreement that is new, but each country in Europe, they need now to develop their national action plan. And for doing that, they need to learn also from experience from other regions, even in the south. So I think it's a very interesting topic because it's not with a silo between the north and the south. Everyone can learn from the other on this topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. Forests do not choose where they are located, and it requires everyone's effort to do this work. So thank you so much for these very insightful responses, Christophe, and for your presentation. I see that we are coming close to time, so I think we'll just slowly start to wrap up this webinar. But again, just from these presentations today, I think it's clear that the forest and landscape restoration agenda is wide-ranging. There are a lot of different levels. It touches upon all of the Rio Conventions and a lot of key global political milestones and initiatives. And so, we would encourage everyone to learn more about their local initiative and understand who the local actors are and how you can continue working and practicing landscape restoration in your area. And I'll pass it back to Jiamian.
Thank you, Jennifer and Christophe. So in the end of this webinar, first, I would like to say thanks once again to our speakers, Professor Dr. Tony Simons and Mr. Christophe Besacier, on behalf of the G20 Global Land Initiative team. We really appreciate the insights and those online resources you shared. Second, I'd like to thank you, Jennifer, for co-hosting this dialogue. It's our great pleasure to have you as a co-host. And lastly, I would like to say thank you to all our participants today for joining the webinar. It was your participation that made this webinar interactive and meaningful. We hope you are inspired by it. Your certification of participation will be sent to your email shortly after the webinar. And please don't forget to join the April webinar about entrepreneurship. We will focus our discussion on how young entrepreneurs run their businesses that contribute to our planet. So this is the end of the webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Christophe. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.